Welcome to Girls Night in Online. I'm Elizabeth Karmel, and I am a food writer, a chef, a cookbook author, and I'm passionate about grilling, barbecue, and steak. In fact, I'm so passionate about steak and cake. I got to tell you, you got to have a little sweet at the end of the meal. Then I wrote a book that came out last summer called Steak and Cake. And it's essentially two single subject cookbooks in one, a cookbook all about steak and a cookbook all about cake. And what I've done is I've mashed them together and paired different steaks with different cakes. And today I'm going to make my very favorite steak taco from the book for you. But before we do that, I got to tell you, I love this new kind of class. I mean, it's being social, but it's at a distance, right? So I want us to really be social and be interactive, just like you would be if you were in my kitchen. And hopefully you're sitting somewhere comfortable. Maybe you have a libation. You know, it's a cocktail time just because we're doing Girls Night In, even though it's only 4 o'clock. And relax. You don't need to take notes, because I've got all the recipes on my website. My website is Elizabeth Karmel, and that's with a K, .com. And you can just type in, you know, a word like skirt steak or tacos, and you'll find the recipe. I also have tips for steak, which I'm going to give you today as well. So don't even take notes. Just relax, sit back, and have fun. So I don't know where you guys are calling from, but where I am, it is full-blown summer. And what that means is it's 94 degrees on my balcony. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I do myself. I'm going to cook outdoors, and I'm going to eat indoors. So we're not going to go outside for the demo. We're going to stay here in the nice, cool air conditioning. We're talking steak today, and chances are, if you eat meat, you love steak. Now, I'm just assuming that someone who doesn't eat meat did not sign up for this class. So are we all meat eaters here? Yes. Yes. Do we all love steak? Yes, 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 yes. So as I said, I'm going to show you my very favorite steak tacos, and we're also going to raise money for my very favorite charity, which is No Kid Hungry. And I don't know if you're familiar with No Kid Hungry or not, but it is a really terrific charity, and it is trying to get rid of childhood hunger in our country. So the way that Girls Night In Online has set everything up is they've put a Venmo, my Venmo name on this chat, and Shelly can tell you more about that if I'm making a mistake. And so any money that you send to me, I'm going to send right on to No Kid Hungry. So I just wanted to mention that, because especially during this period of time that we're going through, you know, I've got all this steak here, and you know, probably most of us have plenty to eat, but there are still children out there who don't have enough to eat. But anyway, before we get to the meat of the matter, let's make a cocktail. I'm kind of in the mood for a cocktail. So since we're doing tacos, I'm going to make my skinny hibiscus margarita. And it's super, super simple. The first time I ever had a hibiscus margarita, I was in Mexico, and one sip, I fell in love. It is really one of my absolute favorite things. And it's super, super simple. The only tough thing is you have to make the hibiscus simple syrup yourself. And I've made some hibiscus simple syrup. The way that you make it, I have a recipe that's a little different than most recipes out there, because I want it to be super, super concentrated. It's my 1-1-1 recipe, and I'm going to come up here and show you what hibiscus flowers looks like. These are hibiscus flowers, dried hibiscus flowers. You can get them lots of different places. You can even Amazon. We all are familiar with Amazon, I know. But anyway, I have to tell you, they are super delicious, super tart, and a beautiful magenta color. I love them with tequila, with gin, but I also love the hibiscus simple syrup on its own. It's great just with club soda if you're not drinking. So I'm going to take a little bit of one of my favorite tequilas. This is a reposado tequila, which means it's been aged anywhere from 2 to 12 months. I love it. It really has a lot of flavors of the blue agave plant. So I'm going to put just a little bit of tequila in there. Then I'm going to squeeze half of a lime. So this is so easy, you don't even really need a recipe. But there is a recipe for the hibiscus syrup on my website. Let's see. Nice, good lime juice. I don't like it very sweet, and so the only sugar that I'm putting in here is from the hibiscus. Let's see. And I've measured out about half a tablespoon of hibiscus syrup. Oh, isn't that gorgeous? Going to give it a stir. Let's see. Let's taste it and see if it's sweet enough. Oh my goodness. Ah, that's perfect. Wow. It's amazing how one sip just like changes your whole demeanor, doesn't it? All right, so I'm going to keep my drink, but I'm going to get rid of everything else. So I can tell you a little bit about meat. Wow, that is terrific. So you may be surprised to hear this, but the most important thing you can do to make a great steak is buy a great steak. Steak is so simple that 90% of the battle is the raw ingredient that you buy. And that's a little trickier than you would think. And I discovered this when I was writing my steak and cake book, because sometimes I would go to the grocery store and I would buy what I thought was, you know, this gorgeous looking piece of meat, and I would grill it and I would cut into it and taste it. And I was so disappointed. It just kind of tasted like warm water. So I went on a search to find the best possible meat that everybody could get, because I knew, especially in New York City, where I was when I was writing this book, I could go to butchers and I could get really great meat. But I wanted everybody to be able to get great meat, whether they were shopping at, you know, a butcher or a big grocery store or, you know, a small grocery store. And I discovered that there is an organization called Certified Angus Beef, and or CAB for short. And they were actually created in 1978 by ranchers and farmers who were looking for some kind of grading system that would make sure that the meat was always a high quality and consistent product. And I was like, wow, you're kidding. And at first I was skeptical. I thought it was just a marketing thing. And then I learned more about it. I actually went out there and worked with butchers and meat scientists and stuff. And it's so amazing because when the USDA grades meat, they grade prime, choice, and select. That's going from the top down. And they grade it on tenderness, juiciness, and flavor. So what happens is once the USDA has graded the meat, then if it's an Angus cow, certified Angus beef grades those cows again for the same three things: tenderness, flavor, and juiciness. But they have stricter guidelines. And so if you buy the certified Angus beef, you're always guaranteed to get rich, beefy beef. So that's my purchasing tip. And so now I'm going to show you what skirt steak looks like. That's what we're going to use today because that's my favorite cut to use for tacos. So when you go to the grocery store or your butcher, this is what a whole skirt steak looks like. Can you see that? It's very long, right? There are 4 skirt steaks in every single cow. So these days, skirt steak is a sought after piece of meat. It used to be that it was the butcher's cut, which meant that butchers would take it home because the only people really using skirt steak were Mexican restaurants making fajita. Today, that is not the case, so it can sometimes be hard to find because now it is one of the most sought after meats. So I'm going to show you that was the piece. Now this is about half that. So this is portioned into a 1 pound piece. And this is generally what you get. You might have it cut in an 8 ounce piece, which would be half of that. And this is the outside skirt steak. There are 2 kinds of skirt steak. There's the inside and the outside. It all comes from the plate region. So if I was a cow, don't laugh. If I was a cow, this would be around where the brisket was. This would be around where the plate area was. That's where this comes from, near my diaphragm and my lungs. And the flank is, we all know what flank is. So anyway, that's where it comes. It comes from the plate muscle, P-L-A-T-E. So this is what makes the world's best tacos, in my opinion. Okay. And remember, if you have any questions about the meat at all, you can, put the questions in the chat. I'm going to clean my hands before I move forward. I've always been a fan of wet ones, but now I'm an even bigger fan, as we probably all are. So notice that this meat is wrapped in paper towels. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But after you buy your steak, there's 3 essential ways to cook a steak, in my opinion. Number 1, grill it. That's what we're doing today, and that's what I do most of the time. Number 2, use a cast iron skillet, and you can either cook it on the stovetop in the skillet all the way, or you can sear it on the stovetop and then finish cooking it in the oven. That's what 90% of restaurants do when you order a steak in a restaurant. And then 3, this is a little bit out there because not that many people do it, but it is absolutely fabulous. And I'll be happy to talk about it at the end if you have questions about it. But you sous vide the meat with a sous vide circulator, and then you can do this up to a day or so in advance. And then right before you serve it, you sear it on a grill or in a cast iron pan. And it is absolutely amazing. It's a great way to entertain. I have done this when I've cooked for 500 people before. I've made tenderloin and I've cooked it sous vide the day before and then seared it right before I wanted to serve it. It's just such an amazing way to cook meat. Okay, so now we know how you know how to buy it, you know how to cook it. Before I get on to my tacos, let me just go through some of the steak myths there are. Okay, number 1, people tell you to take the steak out and let it come to room temperature. If you've ever heard that myth, raise your hand. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't do that. There are 2 reasons. Number 1 is I love a rare to medium rare steak. Do I have company here? Rare to medium rare? Okay. All right, so if I keep it in the refrigerator until just before I want to cook it, then I'm almost guaranteed that I'm not going to overcook it. If I bring it to room temperature, then the meat is at room temperature, and then by the time I get a really great sear on it and great grill marks on it, or in a cast iron pan, I could easily overcook it on the inside. I mean, some cuts of meat like skirt steak take so much less time than you think they're going to take. So that's one reason why I don't bring meat to room temperature. The other reason that I don't bring meat to room temperature is that everybody's interpretation of how long it takes to bring meat to room temperature is different. So some people may think 15 minutes, some people 30 minutes. Some other person might say, oh, I'm going to have steak for dinner when they're eating their lunch at noon and then not cook their steak till 8. And the longer that you leave any protein out, steaks included, at room temperature, the longer the the greater the possibility that you're going to grow bacteria on that food. And that is not a good idea. That's why we have refrigerators. So that's number one. Number two, some people tell you to salt the steak in advance. Now, you saw that I wrapped this in paper towels. And if you were in class, I would say, does anybody have any idea why I wrap this in paper towels? I call this my mummy technique. And that I wrap it in paper towels so it will gently remove all the surface moisture. Because I can't get a good sear or any kind of crust on my food if it's wet. If it's wet, what happens is although that wetness has to dry or evaporate before it will start to caramelize. So I want my meat to be dry, and then I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil all over it, and that's to seal the juices on the inside. And so if I salt my meat, what happens is that just brings all the moisture to the surface. I mean, it does it with vegetables, anything you salt. I mean, if you can remember, people used to tell you to salt eggplant to remove the bitterness. And what would happen is you would salt the eggplant, and then all the liquid from the eggplant would come up, and then the eggplant would be kind of dry when you cooked it. So anyway, that's why I say don't salt in advance. And then finally, testing for doneness. So a lot of people take a paring knife out to the grill or to the skillet, and while it's cooking, they cut it to see what color it is on the inside. That is a big, big, big no-no. So, and the reason is because we just talked about juicy. I want a juicy steak. I know you want a juicy steak. And so if you cut it, all the juices are just going to run out of the meat, and instead of being reabsorbed when you let it rest. So you're going to have a dry steak. But I've got the answer for you, and I'm going to come closer. So this is my A-OK method of testing for doneness, okay? And I want everybody to give me an A-OK sign, okay? And pretend you're holding a butterfly. So don't smush it up, right? Just pretend you're holding a butterfly, and then take this finger and just gently put it in the fat pad of your hand right there. Don't move it. Don't move it like this. Just put it right there and close your eyes, okay? I want you to close your eyes because this is like a Zen thing. We're going to do the itsy bitsy spider. Do you remember that? Itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Okay. So you got the A-OK sign. That is raw meat. Feel how mushy that fat pad is? Like it is raw meat, okay? Now it's a little tenser and it's rare. It's a little more tense and it's medium. And it's a lot more tense and it's well done. Can you feel that? So you can practice that on your own, but I love it because it never ever fails. It never fails. And I've done it for so long that I can be cooking and I don't, when you start, you kind of just wash your hands and use your finger because it's better for your sort of feel memory. But now I can just use my tongs and feel it. That is well done right here, my hand, well done. So anyway, that is the best way to test for doneness. So I just debunked those 3 myths. Now I'm going to tell you very quickly what you do want to do. And no matter what kind of steak you buy, this is what you want to do. Okay, you want to dry the steak just like we did. Just a few paper towels and just wrap it gently and let it sit. You don't want to scrub it or, anything because you might disrupt the meat fibers. And it's very simple. It just comes out, Can you guys all see that really well? Yes? It's just, you can see just a little bit of the juices, right? And it's completely dry. Then you want to put a very thin layer of olive oil over the entire thing. And what that's going to do is that's going to prevent any of the natural juices that are inherent in the meat from evaporating out. We all know about dehydrated food. You might even make your own food. Beef jerky is dehydrated. What happens is if the heat will eventually dehydrate all food unless you coat it with oil And when you coat it with oil, you're preventing those molecules, those water molecules, which we call juice, from leaving the food. So I have a mantra: oil the food, not the grains. And that's whether you're cooking meat or vegetables or fruit or fish or anything. Just a little bit of oil will make sure that it's juicy. It will also prevent stickage. And because stickage is what happens when any food, but especially protein, hits a hot surface. But if you relax, have a libation, that's my cue. So good. Do you have a little
question for you, Elizabeth? What about dry aged?
What about dry aged meat?
Yes.
Dry aged meat is fabulous. And when they dry age the meat, they do not trim the fat, but they do hang it up in a meat locker that's in a controlled temperature, and some of the moisture does evaporate out, and it intensifies the flavor. So, but it's protected by layers and layers of fat. So I don't know if that's what they were asking the question for, or whether or not you should buy dry age. You should absolutely buy age, because what happens is after they age the meat and they're really intensifying the flavors, it's the same kind of thing like, you know, aging wine or bourbon or tequila or whatever. It gives you more flavor. And then of course they trim all the fat, and they trim any outside layer that's been exposed to the air. And so you get this beautiful center muscle that just has concentrated flavor. Does that answer the question? Okay, so
yes.
Okay, great. So anyway, what I was gonna say is that meat instantly adheres to a hot surface. If you relax, have a drink, have a conversation about dry aging, then what'll happen is the meat will naturally release itself as it cooks. And then so all you need is a pair of tongs. You don't need a spatula. If you have to use a spatula for your food, you probably haven't oiled the food, and you probably are trying to turn it too early. Next, you want to test for doneness, the way I told you, testing and feeling. Then next, you want to rest the meat. We're going to put this over here. You want to rest the meat, and that's super important. A minimum of 5 minutes to rest the meat, and that allows the meat to relax. You've taken it off the heat, and all the juices are reabsorbing. So that's what makes it juicy. And then there's a finishing touch. So the finishing touch is really what makes the difference between a home cook that's a pretty good cook and a really great cook. And that's really what restaurants do. So the finishing touch, they might drizzle the steak with a little olive oil, a little coarse sea salt like fleur de sel or Malden sea salt, or something I do all the time, not with skirt steak, but because skirt steak is so rich and beefy and has a lot of fat in there. But with another kind of steak, I'll make a compound butter out of softened butter, herbs, and seasonings. And then I put just a dollop of that on the steak as it rests. And then as the steak rests, the compound butter melts, and it gives you the flavor sensation of a really complicated sauce. But it's not complicated. So anyway, let's get to the steak tacos. I just want to show you. I grilled this right before you all came on to join me, and this is, you can see that this is a piece of skirt steak that is, can you see it? That is about like the small piece, the portion piece that I saw. Can you see it pretty well? Anyway, but the really important thing about skirt steak is you must carve it against the grain. And does anyone know what that means? Raise your hand if you know what it means. Okay. So basically, the raw skirt steak, I'm gonna show you again. It's very easy to see it. Very easy to see when it's raw that the grain goes like this, right? Can you see that? So the grain goes up and down and up and down. Okay. So I'm gonna show you one of the easiest ways to know how to cut it against the grain. So since it goes up and down and up and down, we don't want to cut it straight across, right? Because then we would be cutting it with the grain. And if you cut it with the grain, then it is very, very chewy and it's very hard to eat. But if you cut it against the grain, then it becomes super, super, super tender. And I'm going to show you how to cut it. So this is a great trick. Can everybody see it if I cut this? Say yes if you can or not. Hopefully you can see it. So that's the steak. That's what it looks like when it's grilled. And I'm going to cut a piece like this. Okay, so I just want to show you. Okay, can you see how the meat fibers go like that? Okay, all right. Now, this is super cool. So we had our long piece of meat, right? I just cut a little piece from it. I'm actually going to slice from the outside in, right? So I want to make sure that this makes sense to you. So I am going to slice from the outside in, and that will guarantee every single time that I cut against the grain. See how that texture looks kind of like honeycomb, you know, or fishnet stockings or something? That's what you want. That's against the grain. So isn't that super simple? Easy, right? Really? Okay, so that's what we're going to use to make our tacos. So I think I mentioned that these are my favorite tacos, but they are also kind of fancy. They're a little bit fancier than your basic taco. I haven't gone anywhere. I'm just getting my toppings. But the good news about the toppings is that they can all be made in advance. So all you have to do before you serve these tacos is grill the steak and warm the tortillas. So when I grilled this steak earlier, I have this little cart. So if I did this in my regular kitchen, you wouldn't really be able to see me because it's not set up for filming like this. So I have this little cart. So this is now the world's tiniest kitchen, this little cart. But anyway, earlier when I grilled this, all I did, I patted it dry. I put a little bit of olive oil all over so that it would stay juicy, and I seasoned it with kosher salt. Now, the kosher salt that I like to use is Morton kosher salt, and the reason is when you season the meat, it stays in the big coarse flake. There are other brands of kosher salt that the minute that you season it, the minute it touches the meat, it melts. And what happens when it melts? It releases moisture. And we've just dried the steak, so we're going to get a great sear out of it. And then now it's wet again. So I'm a real proponent of Morton kosher salt. So, okay, I did that. I let it rest. We cut it correctly against the grain. Now it's time to build our taco. I am using flour tortillas. You can use corn or flour. When I have a lot of toppings, I like to use flour because corn has a tendency to crumble when you fold it over. And then a taco's a mess anyway. but then it's a real mess because then all the toppings fall, you know, on your hands. So this is my favorite taco, and I'll tell you what the toppings are. I have a carrot jalapeno relish that I made them this time with rainbow carrots, but you can use regular carrots. So it's just shredded carrots, shallots, and jalapenos, and then you boil vinegar, sugar, and a bunch of spices, and you pour it over the raw vegetables. You stir it and let it sit until it, you know, until it cools a little bit, it's warm, and then you put it into sterilized jars. The great thing about it is it makes a lot. So I have a bunch of these. It makes 5 pints. So I have a bunch of these that I can give away to friends and family, and but I also can use it on everything. It's great on anything that you can imagine, and I love it on tacos because the vegetables are crunchy, and there's a little bit of heat and a little bit of spice, but the acidic nature of it cuts through the rich beefiness of the skirt steak. So, and I'm gilding the lily here, right? This is a fancy taco. So this is my Polti Crema, which I've made with sour cream and mayonnaise. They love mayonnaise in Mexico. I don't know if you know that. These are not authentic though. And then a chipotle with adobo sauce. And chipotles are, and that you buy in a can if you've never bought them. Chipotles are smoked jalapenos, and adobo sauce is kind of like a Mexican version of barbecue sauce. It's really thick. It's kind of a reddish brown. It's made with ancho chilies and garlic, and it's just so delicious. But they can have a lot of spice to them. So if you make this, start with 1 chipotle and adobo sauce and taste it, because it can be super, super hot. And then, of course, we have guacamole, because I can't eat a taco without guacamole. If you don't like guacamole, you can just use slices of avocado, but I love guacamole. I also put the pit in mine because I made this earlier. I don't know if it makes any difference, but it makes me feel better. And it doesn't look like it's oxidized at all. Okay, so now we'll put a generous amount of guacamole. Boy, doesn't that look good? Yum, I can't wait. And look at that. I mean, this looks like summer too, doesn't it? It's so colorful. There's my relish. And now I'm gonna put 3 or 4 pieces of steak. Oh, I wish you all were here to eat this with me. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna put 5 pieces of steak. I kind of like a smaller taco, but I've been having a hard time finding. Let's put a little more guacamole on it, just because we can. I've been having a hard time finding the smaller ones. Okay, so. Oh my gosh. Woo! It's already spilling on my hands, just like a good taco. So look at that. Yes, see, it wouldn't be a taco if it didn't get all over me. So that is my skirt steak taco with my carrot jalapeno relish. I sometimes also call it a hell of a relish because it's a little bit hot. It's not quite, it's kind of hot, kind of like hell is hot, right? It's not hotter than hell, but it is a little hot. And then the Polti Crema kind of is soothing with a little bit of heat. And then of course the avocados make it nice and cooling too. So this is what I think defines summer. And look at that skirt steak. Can you see how perfectly rare and made it is? This is not very pretty, but before I did that, look at that. Isn't that skirt steak amazing? Yum, right? There we go. There we go. So there we go. That's our tacos. Does Anybody have any questions about the tacos, about sous vide, about anything?
First of all, I think if you look out your window, we're all there. We're coming for dinner. So be prepared.
Okay, good.
Okay. Did you flavor the avocados?
Did I what?
Flavor, add anything to the avocados?
I did. Okay, so I lived in Chicago for a very long time, and Rick Bayless is a good friend of mine, and he makes this Frontera original guacamole mix, which is basically tomatillo salsa. And I have to tell you, I've made it from scratch, and I've made it using this, and it's really better with his. So this is actually the recipe that you're going to get, and this is the recipe that is in my book. I call it 1, 2, 3 Frontera guacamole, and because it's just 3 little steps. So yeah, so I find when you use this, which is tomatillos and garlic and some green chilies, that you don't need to add cilantro or anything else. It's perfect just the way it is. If you guys, I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, but you can get it at the grocery store. I love it. I love it. And you know, I make almost everything from scratch, but when I find a product like that I love, I just use that.
It's great. It looks like, oh, there's one more. If you have leftover steak, how do you advise reheating it, if at all? Should you carve all the steak with leftovers in mind?
That's a very good question. I do not carve it in advance because it maintains its integrity more if you refrigerate half of the steak that you have left over. A few nights ago, I grilled a flat iron steak, which is a lesser known steak, but also one of my favorite steaks because it has that, it's much leaner than skirt steak, but it has that rich beefy flavor. And so I just saved it, and then I just took it out of the refrigerator. I left it in its packaging. I used a heavy duty Ziploc bag, and I let it come up to, come up to temperature so it wasn't ice cold. And then I sliced it and ate it like that. You can, if your steak is super rare, you can heat a pan, like a cast iron skillet or another pan on the stove. Don't put any oil in it, just heat it really dry, and then just put the steak, slice the steak, and then put the steak in there literally like 20 seconds aside. And it'll warm it through, but it'll still be rare on the inside. The outside, of course, will be brown because it'll be cooked. But if you like it a little bit warmer, that's awesome. I've done that too. That's a good way to do it.
Got a lot of thank yous, a lot of people how wonderful it is. Everybody thinks it looks amazing, but I don't see any other questions. So thank you so much, Elizabeth, for doing this for us. It was wonderful. It was really wonderful.
Well, thank you, and have a great summer. Make this recipe, make the hibiscus simple syrup. It's super fabulous, if I do say so myself.